the retreat is a good time that we always take a second to reflect and pause and look at the progress we've made. And one of the things that I think Brandon touched on was that it's good to just have that pulse check to see, how far have we come in the last quarter. And really, I was thinking about it from my standpoint of, for me, the mile markers that I have tend to be October, because that's when I've had milestones in my life. Especially with the business. That's when we bought the building in 07 was in October. First employee was hired in, I think, October of 08. Then last year was when we bought the house and moved out. So it's always good to just kind of have those milestones, because what's hard to remember when you're growing personally and professionally every day is how far you've come, because it's incremental things. And it reminded me of when I was in Seattle and Vancouver and Whistler, Canada. This is from my boy Kale. This summer, we were driving on what's called the Sea to Sky Highway between Vancouver and Whistler. And so you've got Vancouver that is essentially on the water, and then along the road on the way up, you've got some mountains down by Vancouver. But I looked at the elevation, and Vancouver is essentially at sea level. It's at 12 feet above sea level. What was amazing about the drive, though, is, so you had Whistler, big mountains up here. It seemed like we were going downhill more than we were going uphill. Like, we just kept commenting on, as we were driving, it was kind of like steady, and then we'd get to a mountain, and then we'd go down. And then it was like steady, and we'd go down. But all of a sudden we ended up here, and Whistler is over 2,000 feet in elevation. So we traveled upwards of half a mile up in elevation, but it didn't seem like it. It seemed like realistically we were going downhill, because we didn't know what the elevation was. So we were wondering, was Vancouver high, and kind of like the Nile River going north but downriver. We started asking ourselves if actually Vancouver was higher than Whistler. We were just all, it was Canada, we don't know. They do things backwards up there, right? And so it didn't until on the way back, it seemed like we were going downhill the whole time too. We're like, how the hell did they do this? And really, when I started thinking about it, how it's done is that the uphills are gradual. They're slow, they're steady, but then the downhills are really extreme. And then but it doesn't even go that far though. It just goes real quick, and then it's gradual. And then it's down, and then it's gradual. And over time, this is kind of how life is too. Especially when we focus on wins, and we focus on growth, and we focus on, hey, you're gonna have all of these things to make yourself better. You're going to grow personally, professionally every day. And you have that expectation, just like we had the expectation that we were going into the mountains and we were going to be driving uphill the whole time. And so we were looking for that uphill climb, but it was really just a slow and steady climb, followed by a few downhills to get around mountains. And that's kind of how the things you face on a daily basis are too. The disasters, the fires, the terrible things have such big magnitude that they stick out in your mind. And then you think you've actually went down further than you started, but in reality you haven't. And so what's important about this, and this is kind of, I think, the difference between this drive and, say, like a drive you take in Colorado. Along that drive, you see lots of signs that say elevation, 2,000 feet. Along the way, you see these mile marker signs. And there wasn't any of those on the Sea to Sky drive, although it was the most beautiful drive that I've ever been on, because the whole time you're by ocean and mountains. It's amazing. But what's important is for all of you to have these types of reminders along the way, because you're not going to see that steady ascent in the drive that you make. You need to have those mile markers. So a lot of that comes in if it's a specific time of the year, if it's a specific trigger point that you say, when I get to here, I know that I've made progress. But you have to have these mile markers. Otherwise, you just continue to climb, and you continue to climb, and you continue to climb, but it doesn't feel like you are. And then you start getting frustrated because you don't feel like you're growing, because because it's just incrementally little at a time. And so for me, I know it's quarterly days and our quarterly strategy days, and really now annually October is kind of my point of reflection to look back. So I was talking with a couple entrepreneurs last week, and they were asking, it's how's business going? It's the normal banter, and it's really about being an entrepreneur is about consistently this steady ascent with a few of these and a few of those and then a few more of those. And what I told them was like, yeah, we're still getting our nose bloodied every now and again, but we pick ourselves up, we dust ourselves, and get on with it. But what I said was, and I've told a couple of you guys this, is that if this is 2011, October, and this is 2012, I can honestly say the best day in October 2011 was worse than the worst day in October of 2012. That is the definition of an ascent, is when you know that you can look back and say, man, it's actually is a lot better. But that's hard to do when you're in this section right here. It just looks like you're dealing with the normal ebb and flow, and it gets frustrating, it gets exhausting. But then when you take a second to look back and put it into a frame of reference, that's when it's actually really exciting. And so what I want to challenge you guys to do is create your milestones, create your mile markers. Whether that be using it as the quarterly strategy days, or maybe this is how we use our semi-annual reviews. Maybe this is what we can do is each semi-annual review, we make you create a snapshot of where you are personally, where you are professionally, and we compare that each time to kind of look for that slow and steady ascent. Because that's how, we've talked about several times about the pyramid growth. That happens slowly and steadily. If you try building this up too quickly, it's going to topple over. So it's really important to remember and reflect on your progression over time. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Any questions on it?
I think it's also really hard when you pinpoint this, like our 2012 marker here. It's also really hard to see like where you come, not only because you don't have milestones, because you're constantly looking ahead and see, oh my God, I still have so much farther uphill to go.
Yeah, you see these mountains off in the distance that you just keep driving towards and keep driving towards. And the other part is when you're inside of this section, all you really, life is kind of like this. You have the ups and downs, and if you zoom in really tightly, it just looks like lots of up and downs that are keeping you stagnant. It's only when you pull out and you notice that this slow and steady ascent is really like this, but the highs are higher and the lows are not quite as low. And that's where, over time, you have to pull out perspective-wise, just like we talked about before, and kind of see what's happening. So that's a good point. And just us in general, like you said, we're always looking forward. Mm-hmm. And so you have to consciously, and that's what entrepreneurially minded people do, because they don't get caught in the past, because that's also not good progress. What's important though is to stop every once in a while and check that elevation sign.